Good evening, Vancouver. Welcome back to Canucks After Dark. It is Monday, December 30th, 2024. We are past Christmas, and it is our last show of the year. And maybe it's merciful at this point with the way that this team is playing. And look, a couple of years ago, if we were talking about a team that was 17, 10, and 8, a 98-point pace, we would have been pretty happy. It's better than it was in the past, but lately it's been tough sledding. But as always, joined by my co-host, Canuck Clay. How are we doing today, Clay?
Parker, belated Merry Christmas, or Merry Christmas. We're still in the season. Early Happy New Year, and happy to be back. We had a 1-week hiatus. I know you're quickly out of town. I was 7 days at sea, so I was not thinking about the Canucks, just checking late game collapses, late game holding off inferior teams. It was not a good week for the team, but I admit it was a great week for me. First world problems, got home late last night, fighting a bit of a cold, but nowhere I'd rather be on a Monday night at 10:03 p.m. than with you, ending off the year, talking about our favorite hockey team.
Yeah. It's been an interesting couple of weeks. We last did a show on December 17th after a Kiefer Sherwood hat trick. After the Canucks had won, 2 of the last 3 against some pretty good teams, right? They beat the Avalanche and the Panthers at home. They laid an egg against the Bruins, and we're like, all right, the team's finally starting to look like a real hockey team at home. And then they go on a 2-game road trip, lose in overtime to Utah, which is a team that they should beat.
Yep.
Lose in regulation to Vegas, which fair enough. Vegas is a really good team. But remember when we looked at the calendar and we said, Utah, Ottawa, San Jose, Seattle. Those should be 4 teams that they're able to beat. They beat one of them. They only beat a single one of those teams. Now, they got points in every single one of those 4 games, which is a nice silver lining. Like, frankly, over they won one of their last 5 games and put up a 500 points percentage over that span. So it could have been worse, but the way in which they lost some of these games is such a far cry from the team last year that won 26 in a row when leading after 2 periods. That's just completely gone.
Can you tell me why A, we can't win a game in extra time, Parker, and B, why is it that only defensemen score on us in overtime? Hasn't it gone Sergachev, Sanderson, and then done?
That sounds right. It's crazy. I don't know how to describe it. Especially because we have the defensemen that should be scoring a lot. It feels like in overtime.
You think so?
Although we didn't last game. But just overall, like, somehow we have quite skilled hockey players on this team. Now, maybe not the fastest, especially, they're not skating the fastest currently. But yeah, in overtime, it feels like everything just goes wrong. Everything is a disaster. 8 losses in overtime. First in the NHL in something. It happens to be that. How many overtime wins do we have?
I thought it was only 3.
3. Yeah.
Oh.
So we're 3-8 in the extra frame.
That's 8 points. Even if you take half of those, then we're comfortably fighting for second or third, not holding on to the last wild card spot in the conference.
A team that won half the games in overtime would have 2.5 more points at this moment, right? Which isn't the end of the world, obviously. If it continues happening, it's a real problem. The one silver lining that I can take from it is there's no 3-on-3 in the playoffs. Unfortunately, there is holding on to third period leads in the playoffs that this team doesn't seem to be able to do, which is just so crazy. Because last year, like, it was comforting going into the third period with a 1-goal lead last year. Like, it was a little stressful, but it was like, more times than not, they're just going to close this out and it's not a problem. But now it's 4-1 and it's a coin flip, which is it's jarring. Like sure, we're missing our number 2 defenseman, and right now our number 1 defenseman, and we're kind of missing our number 1/2 center, and everything that's sort of gone wrong roster wise for this club has. But man, that's more of a when we were talking about structure and how hey, we can just throw the 4th line out there and close out games. That's not happening either this year.
Yeah, and I wasn't gonna be over dramatic and say, and the one game that they did win, they had to hold on. But actually, when I had to watch all these games, right, all the recaps before I came on the show because I was away, and I recognized that San Jose scored their third goal with like 10 seconds left, so it's not like they were in danger of giving up the San Jose one. But that's a team you should beat more than 4-3, admittedly too. So, You've seen these games. I don't know. I'm sure we're not going to go through the Utah and Vegas ones. Maybe a little bit more of the Seattle and whatever. But overall, like, just talk to me, man, because I haven't watched these games in full. Are these like bad performances? The Seattle one, I get. We were fine for 55 minutes, right?
Yeah, and it's funny. Like if we do go back to the Vegas one, like the Canucks played fine in that game.
Yeah.
Right. They lost 3-1. Sure, there was an empty netter with a minute to go. Right.
Yes,
that game wasn't the problem. Right. Shot attempts were identical in that game. Expected goals at 5-on-5 were 50-50 in that game. 1.96 to 1.95. Scoring chances 22-20. Like it was a dead heat that Vegas happened to win. Right.
Yeah.
And that was a game that you look at and it was like, man, after losing to Utah in overtime, that Vegas game was like, yeah, we lost, but like process wise, it was fine, right? We hung in there with Vegas, and we'll bounce back. Oh, it was the second night of a back to back. We've got Ottawa coming up. The boys are coming home. Should be fine. And then they allowed 2 in the first period to Ottawa. They get those 2 back, and then they just weren't. It was a weird one, right? Because even in that Ottawa game, like analytically, the Canucks were the better team, but they let it get to overtime. Right. And they tie it in the third period and they get scored on in the first 20 seconds in overtime. Right. Yeah. Like they never even did anything. It was just quick down the ice and they scored. It's just, I don't know what the deal is with overtime in this team, but Ottawa shouldn't get you there most of the time. You shouldn't be allowing 4 goals to Ottawa on 22 shots or 5 goals on 22 shots. I should say. Right. So goaltending was clearly an issue in that one. For the Canucks, Lankinen had a bad night, but that also was the game that had the backup goalie that was in like his first game ever or something.
I hate that. We always do that.
I want to say it was so. You knew we were going to lose that one, but it's just been a very bizarre handful of games.
And before we get into the weeds of how they're losing and who they're missing, if we go back to our show on the 17th. And I'm pretty sure if we were smart, we would at least looked at the schedule and said, Vegas in the next 9 games is the only difficult one. Like Utah, Ottawa, San Jose, Seattle, Calgary, Seattle, Nashville, Montreal. And then they go on that, they play all those tough teams. Yeah. But they're not going to go 9 for 9, but they could easily go 5, 6 or 7 out of 9. And now they might, it's so frustrating, man.
You should go 6-3 in that stretch.
Yeah.
If you're a contending team against teams that aren't great, right? If you look at the standings, you look at the top teams in the league. You look at Winnipeg, Vegas, and New Jersey, right?
Yeah.
Actually, sort by points percentage. Winnipeg, Vegas, and Washington right now. They're all at 700 points percentage, and that's playing every team in the league, right?
Right.
If you're a top 10 team, you have a points percentage above 625. Which is 5 in 8 games you win, excluding overtime. So you should win 5 out of every 8 in general. Against bad teams, you should probably win 6 out of 8. And then against really good teams, maybe you win 4 out of 8. And that sort of evens itself out, right?
Yes.
So you should be beating San Jose 75% of the time. And Ottawa 75% of the time. And Utah 75% of the time. And Seattle 75% of the time. And you'll take some losses against the Tampas and the Bostons and the Winnipegs of the world. But it's the trends that are the concern, and really it's the way that they're losing these games, right? We can talk about roster issues all we want, but it's just the blown leads, right? Like their last 3 games, Canucks have had 13 goals, right? What a far cry from last year. And sure, the defense is awful right now. Right, that's clearly the problem. Defense, Demko's, fine, but he's not there yet, and you can tell Lankinen is, needs a bit of rest potentially. But
sure,
the defense is like the team's scoring at an okay clip, right? I don't think that's really the issue, right? Like, I guess overall goals were actually
but you're right. Last 3 games, 4-4-4. You should do better when you have 12 goals in your last 3 games.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's bizarre. And sure, one of those games without Hughes, right? And Hughes was dominant in that 4-3 win against San Jose, as he is often. But yeah, like there's some holes, and it's not getting easier, right? Like you said, they sort of have 4 quote unquote easy games left, right? You need to win a few of these because then you're going into the gauntlet. The Capitals, who coming into this season didn't have super high expectations, but guess what? They're 3rd in the NHL in points percentage.
Wow.
The Hurricanes, who are a top team consistently. The Maple Leafs, who I think have had a couple of struggles, but they're doing fine, right? They're 22, 13, and 2, right? 2 overtime losses. That must be nice. And then the Jets, who are the best team in hockey right now. And then LA, who's, decent. Edmonton, who's very good, right? Like there's a lot of hard games on the schedule coming up. That is really concerning when you're not going to have Pettersson probably for a lot of those. You might not have Hughes for a few of those as well. And you have a defense that, like, you have Eric Branstrom, who is a castaway running your top power play, and Tyler Myers is your bona fide number 1 defenseman right now.
2 weeks ago, Parker, we were talking about getting to basically for the second week of January before that murderer's row to be in a good spot where you could go 500 on that road trip. But now it's almost like we've pushed that up, at least in my mind, we pushed that up with missing Hughes, Pettersson, and Hronek now. You can't afford to, I'm just afraid that they're going to squander some of these next 4 games, right? Against Calgary, Seattle, Nashville, Montreal. And then, it just, you know me, I'm ever the optimist. It's not even my shtick. I truly have glass half full, but I'm not an idiot either. Like I can see like what happened at the end of that Seattle game, and it depends what we can always do this. You can always paint the narrative that you want to. You can say the Canucks played well for 55 minutes, doing what they should have done, a good, tidy home game. And yes, they had some brutal collapses, including in overtime, but that shouldn't define the whole season. But part of me, and I'm not being over dramatic, it kind of says, and I can't imagine what X was like after that game, that kind of, the season might hinge on that. Like if we start to lose a lot now, people are going to point to that game too. So I'm not trying to be over dramatic either way, Parker. I'm just, and maybe it's because I missed the game, right? So then I read all the stuff, I come back and the sky's falling, and I can't wait to watch the game tomorrow night to see how they come out against Calgary.
Yeah, I think for me, it's, last year the team played very solid defensively, right? That's because again, you can look at it, you can definitely paint whatever narrative you want, right? Like, hey, look, the team's struggling, didn't have Miller for 10 games. Pettersson is clearly battling a knee issue, right? Going from 90th percentile speed to 50th percentile speed. There's something wrong there still, right? And now they don't have Hughes for a bit. Hronek out for 8 weeks. Issue after issue after issue. But it's and you can say, hey, look, they're still in a 98-point pace, right? After all of that, they're still in a 98-point pace, and that is very true. And that's honestly great. The problem is just the dramatic shift that we've seen, right? Where they used to go into a third period, and you were like, great, this game is locked up. Well, look at the last few games, right? You look at that game against the Kraken, obviously, right? 3 goals in the last 5 minutes of the third period to tie the game. They win in overtime. You look at the game against the Sharks. They go into the third with a lead, a 3-goal lead. They score 1 4 minutes in. They keep the gas pedal down. They outshoot the Canucks 13-4 in the third, and they finally break through with 6 seconds left. But based on the way things are going, there's nothing stopping them from scoring 2 minutes earlier, and suddenly it's interesting, right? The results are still okay based on everything that's going on, but it's that dramatic shift in what we saw last year to what we're seeing now that's concerning. Because, again, I don't like, 10, 20 games into the season. I don't like, let's not paint any broad brushes here, but we're almost at the halfway mark. Right? We're 6 games from the halfway mark. In 11 days, we will be at the halfway mark of the season after that game against the Hurricanes. That's, they really have it's pretty safe to start painting some narratives now, right? Especially when you're looking at what's coming, right? You're looking at Pettersson being, week to week. You're looking at Hughes potentially being week to week, right? You're 2 of who are supposed to be your best players. being missing. And again, the Canucks look fine without them on Saturday. But it's also Seattle, right? It's not one of the top teams in the league. When we're about to face in 9 or 10 days, the Capitals, the Hurricanes, the Leafs, the Jets, the Kings, and the Oilers all in a row. Who knows? They could just ride that out, go 550 over that 6-game stretch, go 3-2-1 or something like that, and everything's fine. Or they could, I could really see them winning one of those games, and then suddenly the wheels are falling off and everyone's panicking. Again, not having Quinn Hughes, I think, is such a dramatic. Without Quinn Hughes and Phil Hronek, who's going to be out for all of those games, you're talking Myers-Soucy first pairing, eating 20-something minutes a night. I don't know what they played against Seattle. I'm actually curious on the numbers here. I'll pull that up. Myers played 22-14. Carson Soucy played 22-24. Derek
Give me the other four guys.
Forbort played 20 minutes in that game. Branstrom, again, a castaway, played 20 minutes in that game. Noah Juleson, who has not been having a banner couple of weeks, let's just say. 19 minutes. They don't have the option to sit this guy. Say in Vinny Desharnais. I think he's been getting a little bit better lately, but still, he hasn't been having a fantastic year. 17 minutes. And they don't have a choice. They don't have anyone else, right? Unless you're going to, rip Willander out of the World Juniors and tell him, please come play for us. This is, it's thin back there.
Zest is asking about Kudryavtsev.
I know nothing about him, to be completely honest. I'm impressed you spelt it exactly right. That's pretty good.
Well, he did, yeah.
But I mean, you're talking about a 20-year-old 7th-round defenseman, right? Yeah. If he's the savior, you've got problems. And again, it seems like he's been playing well in the AHL. He's got 14 points in 23 games as a defenseman. That's great. But yeah, that doesn't what's that gonna fix, right? Are you putting him in for Desharnais every once in a while, the one you just pulled up from Trevor here? It's basically have 6 third-pairing defensemen right now. I think they have at least 5 in the lineup, right? I think you can make the case that when Soucy's playing well, he's a 4, maybe a 3, he's a second pair.
Sure.
And Myers at his best is a second pair defenseman as well. But they have at least 4 third-pairing defensemen.
Yeah. Okay, so I can tell the way the show's going, which I love giving you guys a peek behind the curtain. Parker and I, depending on our schedule, sometimes we meet 10 minutes before the show. Now that's what we used to do 4 years ago. Now we sometimes meet 2 minutes before the show because we just trust each other, and we rarely get a chance to talk about the flow of the show. But I think, Parker, the way we're going, there's no need to go through any of these games because there's so many stories, and we can refer to pivotal moments in the past. 2 weeks of games in talking about these talking points. So I'm really glad that you brought up the defense. So here's the thing. We use American Thanksgiving as the first, pivot point. And then I don't know about you. I feel like from American Thanksgiving, the end of November to now, it went by so fast. With that 1 month to me, went, I don't know, in personal life, work, whatever, it went by so fast. And so now I'm looking at this D, and Hronek's still out for another month. It'll be amazing if we gone back before 4 Nations. Hughes week to week. So yeah, you're right. 1-2 gone. And if you call Myers and Soucy a borderline 4 or 5 guys, Trevor was right that there's 6 of these guys. So one thing I wanted to run by you. Let's talk about the D since we're on them. Is Jeff Patterson was hosting with Matt Scarstay. And he was talking about Eric Branstrom. And actually, I read this in Thomas Strantz as well. So both guys were talking about using Eric Branstrom more. Now, we both liked Branstrom when he started. And then he kind of regressed a little bit, right? Came back to the kind of the mean. And now they were talking about 5-on-5. He's their best defenseman outside of Hughes and Hronek 5-on-5. He's still learning the power play one, all that kind of stuff. But can you see a world? Would you be happy, Parker, if they gave Branstrom more responsibilities? Because I think he was 4th or 5th on that time on ice that you just read to me about 2 minutes ago.
Yeah, he played 20 minutes, which was 3rd on the team.
Oh, 3rd.
Actually, no, it was 4th. It was 18 seconds behind forward. So basically in lockstep. They're clearly at the point without Hughes and Hronek that they're just rolling them. right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't, sure, you could try to get Branstrom up to 22 minutes, but then who are you bringing up with him, right? Because you're keeping Myers and Soucy together. You're pulling Forward up with them, and then, Forward's getting 22 minutes, and then you're taking 2 minutes away, and then Soucy and Myers are down to 20, and then Jules and Desharnais stay around 18. I don't think that moves the needle a lot.
Okay.
I don't have the, I can pull it up, but I don't have like the analytics on, scoring chances with whoever's on the ice. But yeah, it's, I like Branstrom. I think he brings that, he's Hughes, but way worse, right? Yeah. And that's not saying bad about Branstrom. That's a lot about Hughes. But he's, he has the dynamic nature to his game that Hughes does, again, to a much lesser degree, that none of these other defensemen have, right? Carson Soucy, isn't going to move a lot, right? He's got a decent shot. He's going to get pucks through most of the time. He can make some passes. He's going to make some mistakes. Same with Myers, same with Juleson, same with Desharnais, same with Forbert, same with Mark Friedman, right? All these guys are, standard. I would just call them, they're standard defensemen, right?
Standard.
Like, they are normal second or third pairing defensemen, right? Their job isn't to be dynamic. Branstrom has that dynamicness to his game that gives you a little bit of a higher ceiling for when he's on the ice, but it also can be dangerous, right? He hasn't been fantastic defensively. He's made some mistakes. But I think you're at the point where you might just have to throw him the keys and say, here, you got to run this defense right now. I know. We know that we traded you for nothing and you were essentially a cap dump. But do
your thing.
To take over.
Exactly.
It's frightening.
Yeah. I want to give Botch Guy a shout out. Thank you for becoming a supporter. We appreciate you. Botch Guy, many of you guys know he's got a great wrestling channel for those who like watch wrestling, and he's starting up Doodle Hockey, his own YouTube channel. So good luck, Botch Guy, and thank you for supporting us. Appreciate it. So, okay, so give me some Christian Wolanin. I like Christian Wolanin. I put him in ahead of DPD, who I think is going to be fine as a second or third pairing, but maybe not this year. And on the right side, I'm not ready to go to Jet Wu yet. So we're scraping here. Breezeball is up with the team, so maybe he gets a look over the next couple games. It's just, wow, look at all the guys we have, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15.
Yeah, right. You look at the defense in the AHL, and it's obviously the AHL. There's no big upgrades, but there's a lot of guys who we've seen little bits of, right? Yeah, you've got Friedman, you've got Cole McWard and Akito Hirose. Right?
Oh, that's right. I can't believe it for Hirose. Yes,
you've got DPD, you've got Wolanin, you got Kudratsev, you've got Jet Wu. Right. I mean, you could call up any of these guys tomorrow and I'd just say, sure. Right. Breezeball. It really is. It's really thin without Hughes and Hronek, obviously.
Do you play defense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Parker Hollowell, man.
For it, but it's genuinely concerning.
Okay. Yeah,
it's a bit of a mess down there, and I'm sort of looking at the schedule, right? And I'm like, okay, well, when are we gonna be when is our sort how long do we have to survive? That's what I'm looking for. And to me, the Four Nations tournament seems like the Canucks need to tread water until then.
Yes,
You get to the Four Nations, you get 2 weeks off. You should get everyone healthy. You can just do a full reset on everything. The Canucks played 20 games before the Four Nations tournament, which sounds like a lot. I counted twice. Yeah. It really seems like a lot, but it's February 8th is their last game, which is 5 weeks from now, 36 days ish, maybe 38 days. Cause January is a long month, something like that. They played 20 games over that span. There's no rest, right? They are playing essentially every other night and with a couple of back-to-backs and the occasional rest day. You look at the next, they play 7 games starting tomorrow in 12 days, right? Yeah. There's really no saving grace coming up until 20 games from now when they go in that Four Nations tournament. And then they come back and have back-to-backs, which is fun.
Let me just entertain this, Parker, just because I think Trevor's either doing this to be nice or he knows that I suck. If you call playing defense parking my big butt in front of the net and blocking both my own goalie's view and their view, sure. No, I'm not the best skater, a good team guy, but not going to help this team. But thank you for asking.
Yeah. So it's like these next 4 games are pretty important.
Yep.
Like,
but I love what you
can pick any 4 games out of a season and be like,
sure.
it's 8 points.
Pivotal,
right?
Yeah.
But if the Canucks falter in these 4 games, and all signs point to the potential of that happening, right, based on their recent play. If they falter in these games, and like let's say they even go 2-2, right, and like the difference between 2 and 2, 3, let's say they win one of them, right, and suddenly they're down to like a 95, 96 point pace, and they enter that gauntlet. Because if they're struggling against these 4 teams, they're going to be really struggling for the next 6 games.
Right.
Because like we could be at a point, if things are going the way they are, by January 18th, 3 weeks from now, it could be a disaster, right? This team could be, out of a playoff spot potentially. They need to sort it out. And every time that we've sort of said that so far this season, they've figured it out for a little bit.
Sure.
But
feels a little different
not
right
having
now.
Pettersson, not having Hughes, not having Hronek, like that's missing your top 2 defensemen and your, in theory, best player, even though he hasn't been lately. That's going to hurt a team. It's like, great, Demko's back. Everyone else is out.
Yeah, I agree with you completely, Parker. And I love what you said about tread. The first thought, indeed, was treading water until 4 Nations because, you push for those last 25 games. But that's exactly what I was saying when we started the show is where I said at least get to January 8th, the start of that Murderer's Row. But I agree with exactly what you just said. It's not wait until January 8th. It's you got to get through this now. The pivotal point is now, December 31st, because you can't squander more than 4 of these 8 points coming up before you get to that Murderer's Row. You're exactly right. Without being over dramatizing this, like I said, we could be in dire straits before 4 Nations, which I don't want to happen, obviously. But we have to be realistic too.
Yeah, it's funny because we are always the very middle of the road. We try to we keep.
Well, you do. Right? You are. Yeah.
Hey, we have 3 bad games. Every team loses 3 games in a row. Like every team does every season. We're on a 4-game winning streak. It's awesome. They're gonna lose 4 in a row at some point too. Like we sort of, we have an idea of where this team's gonna be, and they've sort of been around that area points wise, a little below it all year, right? We were hoping around 109 last year. I expected somewhere around 104 this year, right? Like a bit of a drop because 109 was crazy good. And I sort of thought you're not going to win 26 games in a row going into the 3rd period with a lead. I just didn't think they'd flip it on its head like they have and lose every game seemingly that they go to the 3rd period with a lead on. It's.
There are a couple things I want to get to. I'm not sure you saw the Patrick Allvin article, and I want to get to Thatcher Demko, but this is also something I wanted to get to. There are already people talking about, do not make a crazy trade. Do not give up Lekaramaki or Willander. Do not do this. Do not do that. And take take a flyer on this year already, given that last year almost nothing bad happened. This year everything bad has happened. So you even it out and you still build for next year by not trading away those 2 of our best prospects. So I'm not asking you, are you throwing away the season already? But do you have time for what Grim is saying is don't make anything crazy just to try and improve your playoff positioning this year? And maybe it's more important, what do you think Rutherford and Allvin think, not what do we think?
I think it's worth being cautious at the very least. This management group we saw it last year, they want to set the market. They want to be there first. They want their pick of the litter, and they want to make their move early. I think that's easier to do when your team is playing really, really well. Because looking at where the Canucks are now, I could see them collapsing. I could also see them going, figuring it out and getting on a heater, right? It doesn't feel like it right now, but it happens, right? It also doesn't feel like the tail's going to completely, drop up from other of them and they're going to end up with 85 points this year, right? most likely they're going to be in the 96 to 102 point range. We still think somewhere in there. But I think if you go out and make those moves now, there's a couple sides to it, right? Like, hey, this defense is an absolute mess right now. If we can go get a defenseman or two, maybe that's exactly what we need to turn this ship around.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or maybe it doesn't turn this ship around and the collapse continues and you've wasted whatever assets you've gotten rid of.
Yes.
It's a tough balancing act. And I don't want to wait forever. What's the actual trade deadline this year?
March. Like, it's late because of Four Nations.
March 7th.
Yeah.
So to me, it's almost like, well, I mean, I imagine there's a roster freeze for the Four Nations or something. Actually, I don't know. Maybe not. But
can you imagine? You start the game on Team Sweden. Well, you're still going to be on Team Sweden, but you change your NHL team. Yeah, stupid.
But it's like, look, there's 20 games until that tournament, right?
Yep.
And after that tournament, you still have, what have we played, 35? Yeah. So you still have 27 more to get that sort of familiarity with your team, right?
Yeah.
So if you want to kind of be a little risky, right? Again, they have a lot of hard teams coming up. And it doesn't get a lot easier after that murderer's row we described, right? It's like, okay, that after that Oilers game that we sort of penned as the end of it, it's okay. Then you have Buffalo, fine. Oilers, Capitals, Blues, Preds. Like it's still a pretty decent group going on until you get to the Four Nations. But if you can, I'm sort of thinking like, if you're at the Four Nations and you're on a 100-point pace, cool, go make whatever moves you want, right? Because look, if you're going to be comfortably in a playoff spot, this team was a game away from the conference final last year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like this team still a good team. I think it's a well-built team. And I think adding 2 defensemen makes it on paper, at least, a very good team, especially healthy. Yeah. So I think that if you can wait till February 8th after that game against Toronto and see where you are you on a 102-point pace after that, which seems hard right now. Right. But if that's where you're at, I say, windows are short, right? You don't have many years where you're going to be a good team. I think you start going for it. If you get to that point and you fault a little bit and you're sort of on the bubble, I have a little bit more time. Maybe you start focusing on slightly lower end defensemen with a little bit of term, right? So you're sort of focusing a little bit on next year. I think it's too early. This team's just sort of floating, right? I don't think you can make one big move one way or the other.
So I hear what you're saying. Context matters. Where you are in the standings matters. So I agree with you. And yes, I agree with you on that. But one thing you said, which is a perfect segue to what and the next point I'm going to ask you about is you said, I could see Rutherford. Imagine if he gets a defenseman or Allvin gets a defenseman, that's going to change things. And I agree with you. They might think that they're only one or two, say even one good defenseman away, like you said, with term. So it's not just a rental. Isn't it funny how we were saying that about Demko? As soon as Demko gets back, we're going to have the best goaltending tandem. As soon as Demko gets back, you're going to see us rocket up the standings. I love Demko. He has not been good. And I get it. He's coming back off it. But I heard 879. I heard 335 goals against average. I've seen him, pucks go off his glove unscreened. I've seen him look so small on breakaways, i.e. the Dunn one and the first goal that was scored against him when he came back. I want him to play well. We need him to play well, but he's not being good. We got to call a spade a spade.
But on the other hand, you can trick yourself, right?
Okay.
You're like, yeah, but by the time we get to the playoffs, Demko could be back to form.
Right.
By the time we get to the playoffs, Hughes is healthy. By the time we get to the playoffs, maybe Pettersson's knee is feeling better, right? By the time we get to the playoffs, maybe JT Miller's playing better. By the time we get to the playoffs, maybe we've added 2 defensemen and we don't have Forbert and Desharnais and Juleson in the lineup. Right. And suddenly you get to the playoffs with a really good forward group. You have Miller and Besser playing with someone like Suter. You've got Pettersson playing with, DeBrusk, and your third line's really stout and your fourth line's really good, especially with how good Max Sasson has been. And then, your defense. Now you got Hughes, Hronik. You've got 2 good second pair defensemen, and Myers and Soucy is your third pair, and you have Demko and Lankinen going into the playoffs. That sounds like a really tough team to play against. Right. So while, it's tough because I think on paper, I think this team has been a lot worse than the sum of their parts so far. Right. On paper, I think this is a really good team, but Demko comes back after missing 9 months. Of course, he's not going to be great. But if he gets back to his normal spot, then this is a really good team, right? Or at least like that. Then you have, again, one of the best goaltending tandems in the league, potentially, right? If he gets back to that form. If Quinn Hughes comes back perfectly healthy, if Phil Hronek comes back perfectly healthy, if Elias Pettersson can play back at least to the form he was at last year, which wasn't fantastic, but it was better. If Sherwood continues to be the problem that he is for other teams, if Höglander can figure out how to score a goal, right? Like there's so many, again, we sort of said it, like it feels like everything is going wrong and the team is still on a 98-point pace, right? So if things just start to go right, then I think this team has the makeup of a contender. The problem is everything's just going wrong at the moment. So I can definitely see sort of any argument that you put towards it.
Yeah, no, that's fair. By the way, Coach Rob, thank you for gifting 5 memberships, even though, as everyone pointed out in the chat, only 3 got handed out. So we're going to owe you a couple bucks, Rob. I'll take care of you. Ann, Dave, and Last Resort, thank you. I'm not sure where the other 2 went. Do you have a theory, Parker?
I think people can have their thing on private, so it doesn't notify. But
I never thought about that. Yeah, otherwise, that's a good point. So thank you, Coach Rob, regardless of people, public or private. We appreciate the support. Okay. And yes, that's fair. A couple of people are saying it's the defense too. And like you said, Parker, I agree. And others did too. You got to give him more than 6 games. You got to give him a few games, but still, I can still say that I still think there's been some goals that he's got to make saves, like for sure. Oh man. Do you hitch your wagon? Like, how do you do the split of goaltending going forward, Parker? Is it situational for you? Back to back, history against opponent, who's hot, all that kind of stuff?
I think we're starting to get into the who's hot camp. My goal or my ideal situation was Demko comes back and he's maybe not back to his, Vezina contender form, but he's back to being maybe a top 15 goalie in the NHL, which didn't seem like a super high bar. And I think he still gets there this year, right? I think not seeing NHL pucks for 9 months has to be tough. And Lankinen has had really good games and really bad games at times. So my hope was, great, they're going to get back. We have a top 15 goalie and sort of a 1B level of backup. Cool. Run them 50-50. That makes Demko get like 30 games or whatever this season, or whatever that ends up being, 25. And then, he's nice and rested for the playoffs and in his form.
Yeah.
Neither goalie, at least in the last couple of weeks, has been super reliable. Again, the defense has been atrocious in front of them, which can't help. So part of me is like, you got to help let a guy get into a rhythm. But at the same time, I think you also have to sort of ride the hot hand, because this isn't a team that is on a 105-point pace that just got their starting goalie back and can afford to trot him out there to get his reps in, right? This is a team that is battling for a playoff spot right now. And we think I think they have a bit of a buffer, right? I think there's a bit of a drop off between Vancouver and Calgary and Utah, right? Like, I think there's still a pretty solid set, 4 in the Central, 4 in the Pacific that should be making the playoffs.
Yep.
Calgary's a point back, right? They can get hot. They can get hot and go on a run. And I think that's something that we should be maybe not concerned about, but it's something we need to keep in mind. At least it's not really a good thing, but the Canucks have a few back-to-backs coming up, right? 2nd and 3rd, 10th and 11th. I think that's it until the 4 Nations. So they have 2 back-to-backs coming up. So those are easy. I think you just keep trotting one out after the other, and then if someone has a fantastic game, you run them again.
Sure.
But otherwise, I think you're sort of in a position where you have to keep both fresh.
Yeah. Now, did you get a chance to read the Ian McIntyre article from today?
I did not.
Yet. Okay. So basically, and I really like Ian McIntyre, not just because he's a good Steveston boy like me, but I think he's fair. I think he's good. And he basically had a good chat with Patrick Allvin, talking about Allvin said what you'd expect him to say. He's looking for more consistency from the players, from the coaching staff. Why are we giving up these leads? He did talk about the great success stories of Bluger, Heinen, Sherwood, Lankinen, of course. But a lot of it was talking about how he needs more from his best players. And he said basically Hughes has been amazing, but Miller, Besser, PD all need to be better. And then a couple interesting things. Ian McIntyre asked about the fact that PD's no trade doesn't move until next year, and that's not because they negotiate that way. It's because of his age. And then Allvin did not basically say there's no way we're trading him. He said that's always an option, but he it's not like he blew it up. But what he did say was interesting. He said that a comment about PD, he got his new 8-year contract, $93 million, and it only gets harder, and we're not even halfway there to winning a Stanley Cup. So my point, Parker, is it's not like they're taking sides, Miller, PD, but I think there's so much expectation on Pettersson from Allvin and Rutherford, from Tocchet. We've talked on this show how we kind of think that obviously Pettersson and Tocchet don't have the best relationship. I just think, I'm sure you've seen it too, when it comes to this whole Miller PD debate, there's so many people that will jump on PD and will give Miller like the benefit of the doubt, and then there are then people that will come to PD's defense. So I'm not making this about Miller versus PD. I'm just talking about PD himself. I just find it fascinating how he plays so well when Miller's not around. Then he comes back, and we need all these guys going, and they're not. And yes, the defense has been bad. Demko's been inconsistent, but I want to now move this to the forwards and say it's the role players that are playing well and not our top guys. And I can't figure that out either.
Yeah,
that was a lot. Sorry, that's kind of long. Yeah,
no, it's good. We actually haven't talked since those sort of press conferences that happened.
That's right.
Right before Christmas,
yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I saw actually a graph on like Pettersson's production and expected goals while Miller was gone. It was funny. It sort of rose, and then before he got back, even it came back down to with Miller levels. So the thing, like Pettersson, we've talked about it being like a confidence thing at times, or is it an injury? And we've always heard, no, it's not an injury. And then now it clearly seems, he's out for seemingly some time, and it seems to be a collection of issues, right? Is sort of what we've heard. To me, that, and I'm just speculating, but to me, it sounds like wrist and knee, right? He's always had he's had these wrist issues. We even saw it after that really nice goal that he scored on the power play, the wrist shot just inside the post the other day. He went by the bench with the other hand, sort of like Connor Garland always does. When he does the bench flyby, he goes far hand and fist bumps everybody. Pettersson did that after that goal, which some people put in on.
Interesting.
And then like the knee tendonitis that has been talked about at times in the past.
Yeah.
Still, like, how does someone go from a 90th percentile in speed, right? Because they track speed and all this stuff, right? He was in the 90th percentile in his first couple of years in just top speed. And now he's around the 50th percentile. He's turned into that's not a confidence thing. That's not he's just not choosing to skate fast. Like, there's something there.
Yeah,
right?
He physically can't. Yes.
There's physically an issue, and if it's just pain, I don't know, or if it's an actual issue that's limiting him. And it's tough because he had the whole summer off, and that didn't correct it seemingly, right? And now he's, what's it going to take? Is it something that can even be resolved, right? Is it something that he's just going to have to play through? It's really tough because obviously we don't have all the answers, right? In theory, the Canucks have the answers, right? The management group should have the answers. They have training staff. They have doctors. They should know, he's battling a knee injury that, we actually think it's going to be fixed it should be better by this time. He just needs to do whatever. Or it's hey, this is a chronic thing that he's just going to have to live with.
Right.
It's, we don't get that knowledge because frankly, this management group is really good at keeping things internal, especially for the last couple of years. So it's tough for us to really know, right? Is it
for sure?
Is this like hey, Pettersson's going to take 3 weeks off and he's going to come back and he's going to be, skating well again? It seems unlikely again with the whole summer and not having resolved it. So it's, I don't really see where the improvement comes from if that's the underlying issue.
Sure. And just before, Lucas, thank you for acknowledging your membership for 27 months. That's over 2 years. That's amazing. And says, thank you for the donation. I'm in and out, but I want to wish everyone a happy and healthy new year. Hope to see some of the Canucks After Dark crew out to the Express game on January 12th. Yes, Lucas designing a Coquitlam Express jersey for the second straight season, which is great news. So congratulations, Lucas, and thank you for the donation. We appreciate it. Okay, so We've talked. I agree with you about everything you said. I really want to just stay. You're right. We haven't done a show since those availabilities. I thought Quinn Hughes and Rick Tocchet both handled it. Questions about the whole PD and Miller thing. I thought they both handled it really well. Quinn Hughes such a good leader, and I know everyone knows that and sees that. I'm not asking you to speculate. I'm not asking you to draw a line in the sand. I'm just asking you, where do you think this goes? Do you see a world where these two can coexist for the remainder of their contracts?
It seems crazy to me that they couldn't,
Yeah.
Like, and to me, I feel like success fixes everything, right? Like if this team was cruising and they had the record that Vegas has right now and they're top of the division and things are going well and everyone's healthy, I don't think this is anything at all. Right.
Yeah.
But the fact they've been struggling and sort of just floating around for the last, or the first 3 months of the season, it's something that just gets brought up and is a problem. Sure. So I think if the team figures out their game, I think that resolves itself. But at the same time, it's like, you're adults, figure it out, like, I get it. You're with these people a lot, right? You're traveling across North America with them, 180 days out of the year, whatever that number ends up being. But at some point, figure it out. Like you can have, like, I don't get it. To me, it just doesn't make sense in my eyes.
The one thing Botch Guy actually put the quote in, I appreciate that. He says, this is Allvin said, about PD. I don't believe that he was aware of just how hard it was going to be. Just because you achieve one thing to get a long-term extension, life just gets harder. Like, that's fair, but that's pretty pointed, I think.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think it's, at first I was sort of like, well, if he's injured, like maybe we shouldn't be harping on him, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the management group is, and they've decided that, it's seemingly not fair game, but they're not coming out and being like, he's still battling something lingering. We know he'll get back to form. It's hey, he's got to figure it out. And to me, that's where I get a little concerned, right? Because there's no really reassuring coming from them. It's like we keep telling him he's got to figure it out, and he hasn't figured it out yet. And that's tough when he's supposed to be your best forward.
I'm with you. All right, so before we go to the people for the last 10 minutes. We have likely 4 games before our next show. We got Calgary tomorrow night, New Year's Eve. Prelude to that, appetizers, Canada, U.S. World Juniors, pretty cool. Yes. Then there's Seattle in Seattle on Thursday, back-to-back Friday, home, Nashville, and then a Montreal Canadiens game before our show on Monday the 6th. So 4 games, 4 winnable games if we had guys like PD and he was playing. What says you, Parker?
It's really tough, man. Like, I look at these, it's like, it's 3-1. It's 3-1 all day. It has to be 3-1. Yeah. But it really doesn't feel like, I don't look at this and be like, whatever, this is no problem. Like right now, it's like, oh wow, well, it's no Quinn Hughes and no Elias Pettersson, and a lot of people aren't playing well. I'm just gonna go 2-2. I hate it. It should be 3-1, or 3-0-1, or 4-0. Actually, no.
I know what you're gonna do. You're gonna add a overtime or extra time loss. You're gonna right.
I might do worse than that. I might go 1-1-2.
Oh, I thought you were gonna do 1-2-1. Okay, 1-1-2. Well, yeah, it was 1-1. Wow. So 1 win in 4.
Like and guess what? They'll probably lead in all 4 of them.
These extra time losses are so funny because the optimists would say 1-1-2. Wow, that's points in 3 out of the 4 games, and then the pessimists would say that's 1 win in 4 games. Yeah,
it's 500. It's really, to me, all it does is because look, you have to end the season, however many games over 500, right? What's the number? Like 13 to 15 games over 500, right? Yeah. Every overtime loss, it doesn't hurt you, but it removes an opportunity, right? It removes a game. If you lose 12 games in overtime over the season, great. You have 70 games now to get to that 13 over 500 mark. It's, it doesn't help. That's for sure.
Yeah. I love some of these predictions. Irwin says 1-2-1. Fangirl says 2-2. Viper 2-1-1. Steel Dog says this market, I'm not sure he's talking about us, over analyzes everything. Edmund says 3-1. Justin checking in from the States says 1-2-1. Botch guy is so unoptimistic. He's going 1-1-3. That might be a math error. And Charlie says, Calvin says, 1-3. Okay, I'll throw mine in. I'll go. I hate saying it. I'm going to go 1-2-1. Yeah, below 500.
Which is
it's horrible
against these teams.
I know. I would love for the one to be Nashville.
Shut us up. Win all 4. Just do it.
Do it.
Yeah, just win all 4.
I will show up with egg on my face next Monday. I'll be happy to do that. Egg all over my face. Yeah. 10 minutes of people questions?
Let's do it.
All right. These are your last questions to Parker and me for the year of 2024. Let's go. Zest 0-4.
500 hockey. It's points in all 4.
All right. Would you agree with what's going on in Vancouver? It's not as bad as the Rangers.
Oh, not even close. Yeah. The Rangers
it's so crazy.
Tire fire.
How can a team with that much talent be so bad?
They're getting old. A lot of those guys, like Zibanejad, has fallen off. Kreider, I think, has fallen off. Like they've completely collapsed. Which is it's crazy.
Yeah. Swerve Irvin says, who can we actually trade for? And I know we've talked about Rasmus Anderson, but Calgary's not going to trade him because they're basically in the same part of the standings as us.
Yeah. If they're smart, they should be looking at trading guys because they're on the edge.
Yeah.
Like again, I always think back to what St. Louis did in 2018, right? Yeah. They said they were in a playoff spot and they said, we are not good enough right now. They traded, they retooled a little bit. They won the cup next year.
Wow. That's true. And I want to bring up really quickly, if I can find it, Thomas Trance actually had some names in his article. Okay, tell me. Okay, these are some defenseman names he suggested as stopgaps. You ready? Mm-hmm. It's an amazing list. It is here we go. Boston's Parker Wotherspoon, Flames blue liner Tyson Barrie, Buffalo farmhand Cale Clegg, Kraken blue liner Josh Mahura, or recent Minnesota Wild waiver claimant ex-Canuck Travis Dermott.
Wow. What an exhilarating list of names. That gets me so fired up for the playoffs.
I'll take the first stab at this one, Trevor. Rick Tocchet was talking about this at the meet and greet last month, and he's saying the right things. He basically said he's not worried about it. He knows that Rutherford Allvin probably won't even want to talk about it until later this season or even the off seasons. Does he get a contract extension? We'll see. It's weird. He's like a lame duck coach if you look at it in old terms. But I think we've seen that this management, they won't lock up guys unless they're really, really confident. And they have. It's not like they don't. Miller, Petey, Hronik, right? Yeah. There's some big ones out there. DeBrusque.
Yeah, and the thing is, Tocchet doesn't hit on the cap, right? It's all Aqua's money, right?
Yeah. You got it.
It's interesting. Isn't Rick Tocchet like the 10th longest tenured coach in the NHL right now?
After a year and a half, exactly. After 2 years, yeah.
So 22 teams have replaced a head coach since we've hired Rick Tocchet.
You can't fire 22 players, so 23 players.
That seems. I feel like leashes are a little short nowadays. Like it's crazy, and you need a new voice. You go make that move. Like. I think it's tough because I think if this team had been this level last year and then this level this year, we'd be like, hey, Tocchet's turned this thing around. We're 600 point pace. We're a playoff spot. Things are okay. The team overachieved last year, frankly, but they're underachieving right now.
Yes.
And how much of that that's one thing I really struggle with, right? I think I'm pretty decent at analyzing the game as a whole. Yeah. But I think where I struggle is analyzing the impact a coach has, right? It felt pretty easy last year because this team goes into the third period with a lead and they shut the door. And it works every single time. That's coaching, right? That's not roster construction because a lot of teams can't do that.
Yep.
But now that's not there anymore, right? So is that a message that's gone stale, which it's too quick for it to have gone stale?
Right.
Is it player performance? And if it's player performance, start shipping guys out. and replacing guys, right? Even if it's a 1-for-1 number 6 D-man for number 6 D-man for another team that just needs some new bodies in the room, right? Yeah. Like, get a little cutthroat. And we know this management group will get cutthroat, right? They're not concerned about that. For me, I think that's the level. That's what you got to start doing. I think going into this trade deadline, you start just replacing guys, which we're kind of doing with injury anyways. Yeah. But I don't know if you just need to get some new faces in the room and see if that gets a spark going or what it does. But like, to me, like, Rick Tocchet proved last year that he is a really good coach. It's hard for me. Like, a fluke would have been stumbling into the playoffs. It was a 109-point team last year. That's not a fluke. So to me, Rick Tocchet, his anecdotes can get a little stale, and he's quite a generic guy, right? But I just don't see him being the problem at the moment, right? 2-3 years from now, every team will have fired their coach again, and sure. we can make some moves, but it feels, I feel like maybe he's part of the problem, but I think it lies on the players just as much.
New drinking game. Take a drink every time someone complains on X about Rick Tocchet not using one of his timeouts. You will get drunk very quickly.
Yeah.
Very quickly, yes, Connor Hellebuyck will win the Vezina Trophy. Their team is number 1 in the league, and he's the number 1 goalie.
He's a problem. He is really, really good.
Who's a better passer, Tyler Myers in overtime or guys working in a warehouse? What does that mean? Like, guys passing stuff to each other? Or
I don't know. That was one of the worst plays I've seen in a long time.
I waste my Wi-Fi on the trip.
Or whatever it was. To have that 3-on-2. I burst out laughing the second that pass went behind Miller. And I was like, what a way to lose before they even scored. Yeah. Because you knew, right? You knew the way things are going. That was going in. I have no idea why that pass was the play. Because it's a 3-on-1 drop pass. Just drop it to Brock Besser. That's all you have to do. Yeah. You gain the line. You've pulled the defenseman over to you. You drop it to Brock Besser. He can either then, it's now a 2-on-0 essentially. He can shoot on the goaltender. He's a great shooter. Or he can feed JT Miller on the 2-on-0. I don't know why Myers decided to fire it behind JT Miller when he's the last man. Yeah. It was mind-boggling to me.
And it's almost like Besser almost faked. It was out of his reach, so I don't think he could get a stick on it even if he wanted to. But it's almost like he faked. I thought I saw. Correct me if I'm wrong. That he did something with a stick to try and fake out, and he thinking that Miller would get the puck, not knowing that the puck is going to be 10 feet behind him.
Yeah, he sort of like half lifts his stick because the pass is so far in front of him.
Yes.
I don't think he can imagine that pass is for him.
Right? Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, just a remarkable play.
Got a lot of content creators in here. Canucks Uncensors in here. That's awesome. Okay, let's do this. Prices are expensive for top 4D. Would you do first, second, and third and roster player prospect? Could this be the price for Anderson? Hoglander first and a second won't get it done. So Canucks Uncensored, I bet you Witten is saying first, second, third, and roster player. So 4 pieces for a guy like Rasmus Anderson.
If this team was currently where Vegas is, yeah. Like you're at the point. Look, Hoglander isn't playing well. Defense is your problem, right? Scoring winger is not your problem. Rasmus Anderson makes this team really like a lot better this year and next. Yeah. I think if you are on the bubble as they are right now, holding a playoff spot by a single point, then no. I think if we can double back on this on February 8th and if the Canucks are on a 103-point pace again, I'd pull the trigger on that. Sure. I could not care less about a second and a third round pick right now. The first can hurt a little bit. Hoglander could hurt a little bit, but the way he's playing right now, I'd much rather have Anderson. That's a fine price for me. if this is a team that is genuinely a cup contender. But they got a lot of work to do in the next month and a half to get there.
Yeah, I agree with you. And we talked about this before. Second and third round, third and beyond for sure. Second, depending, you never know. So I agree. I make this move too. But just Calgary, and we kind of talked about it earlier. Calgary probably doesn't, even though they should, because they may have delusions or illusions or hopes of making the playoffs this year and beyond.
Yeah.
Wow.
And look, they're in a spot right now where they can reasonably they got basically the same record as we do, right? Sure, they have a
they beat us
goal differential.
If they beat us tomorrow, they pass us, and they wipe out the game. No, they don't wipe out the game in hand because we play against them.
Wipe out the game in hand, but they have a 1 point lead. Actually, knowing how this will go, they'll beat us in overtime, and then we're tied with the game in hand, and we're fine. But again, that
was funny.
I look at these two teams. Our team, the Canucks, should be a lot better than Calgary. Mm-hmm. They just haven't been, right? I think Calgary's overachieved a little, and I think we've overachieved a good bit, right? We're probably 6 points lower than where we should be.
Yep.
Which is a lot over the course of a season, right? That would be like the 110-point pace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's end with this one. This Dogwood brings up a good point, because I've heard this debate the past couple of days in the day I've been home. If there's no defense in the market, let's turn every game into a barn burner of offense. Now, I know Dogwood may be being sarcastic, but brings up a good point. That first game, remember that first period of the first game? I thought we were going to score like 800 goals this season. It was so awesome against Calgary. With this defense the way it is, some have suggested with no Hughes, PD, Hronek right now, you don't have the top end talent, so you got to muck up the game and play a defensive, boring win 1-0, 2-1. But how do you do that with the how do you do that with the 6 guys though that we've been talking about that are on our D right now? So it's like not catch-22. It doesn't make sense to me. But maybe that's the way that exactly what you said. Eliminate variance, reduce it, and just make it more of a coin flip as opposed to a run and gun. What do you do? What do you do is my question.
I don't think that's this coaching staff strength. I think that's the problem, right? I think it would work under, a Boudreau, for example, right? Where they throw defense out the window and play the offensive style. That's not this coaching mentality. And I really don't see it working with especially without Hughes in the lineup. Because I look at the bottom 9 of the forward group. I don't see a lot of goals coming there, right? Höglander essentially can't score right now. Suter can score, but like him and Garland, great. That's your second line right now, right?
I know.
Heinen, Bluger, and Sherwood. Sherwood's the only one who has a shot on that line, essentially, right?
Joshua has been great.
Sasson and Joshua, they're not scoring goals either. Especially Joshua right now has been struggling. There's no goals to be had in this lineup. It feels like. So it feels to me if you need to be able to muck it up and get these 2-1 games, and you'll win some of them, you'll lose some of them, and you'll get points out of others. I don't think this team can afford to run and gun with anybody right now.
I think you just put the 6 defensemen in the crease with the goalie and just block every single inch of the net. That's what you do.
It would hurt. It would hurt a lot.
It would. And we end our year. Thank you, Steel Dog, with a $7 donation. A great way to end the year. And as Steel Dog says, have a happy new year, everyone. Parker, thank you, Steel Dog. Are you a resolutions guy?
We're thinking for the hockey team.
No, sorry. You can do that, but I was actually thinking for you personally, my good friend.
It's always the standard. Just try to be a little healthier. But
Yep. And what are you saying? It works or it doesn't?
Yeah, sometimes it does. I got a good feeling this time. We'll see.
Okay, well, I'll say this, just if I may, and you're in good shape, so you'd appreciate this. And everyone knows my struggles since I completely ruptured my Achilles tendon last summer. So for the first time, I did 3 consecutive days of workout on the cruise. It was almost a guilt thing because I was eating so much and drinking so much pop. But I did do 3 consecutive days of 45 minutes on the treadmill, and I feel good. So it makes me want to at least commit to, I'm always going to be drinking pop. I'm always going to be snacking on crap. But if I can be a bit more active and get the fear out of my mind, it's a mental thing, I think, for me with my just coming from such a traumatic injury. So I'm putting out here now to all the 650 people. Wow, 650 people in here. that I am going to try. I'm not saying I'm going to drink less of this stuff, but I am going to try and exercise more, and we'll see how long that lasts. You can all hold me accountable, especially you, Parker.
Sounds good. I'll be on you.
All right,
folks.
next week, Monday?
Next Monday, 10 o'clock, folks, post-game after an overtime loss against the Montreal Canadiens. We will be here, folks. Thank you all for a fun year, as always. We'll be back next Monday. Hit the like button, hit subscribe. Like Clay said, 650 of you in here. Get the likes up, hit subscribe. If you're on the Twitter side, X side, whatever, jump over to YouTube, hit subscribe. Helps us out. We appreciate it. Any parting words?
No, that's it. No show for me now. I'm going to go home and try and... I'm still swaying. I don't know if you've ever been on a cruise. My first day, it feels like I'm counterbalancing my balance. So I'm just going to try and find my bed and hit the sack.
Sounds good. All right, folks. Thank you all. Have a good one. We'll see you next time.
Happy New Year.